This conference will now be recorded.
We're going to have a peer update with committee recommendations. So, who wants to present?
Okay. All right, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Shanahan, and public, thank you for having us here, taking the time to listen to what we've been doing the last 3 months. Is that better? Okay. I'm going to go through an introduction. I'll mention the members of our team, but Tabitha is going to take the survey results, and Alex is going to walk through the details of the way we phase this work and our approach to the RFP reviews. And then we'll only be able to go so far publicly because we've got some confidential information from the businesses, and we'll request an executive session at that time. Oh, wrong arrow. All right. Okay. All right. So the members of our team, and first of all, I'd like to say, I want to thank you guys for picking a really great team. I'm Robert Kraus. Rob is fine. I have a career in engineering project management, which gave me a lot of experience in dealing with people from different viewpoints, different backgrounds, competing requirements, and just trying to merge all that into fairly complex projects. Automotive was my background. Tabitha Mall is our vice chair, and I think a lot of you know her as the Keep Surfside Beach Beautiful chair. And she's got a wealth of retail executive leadership, got a great eye for the big picture, but also sees all the little details that go into that. We're already talking about branding and marketing type strategies as we go forward, in selecting the businesses. Alex Samso is our secretary. Alex is a great researcher and organizer. He takes all of our discussions and distills them into cohesive, cogent, and concise documentation. The minutes, he's also prepared this presentation, took the lion's share of it. John Hyatt is another member of our committee. Oh, and Alex is also on the planning committee, I'm sorry. John has a background in law enforcement and private investigation, insurance-related risk management, and John has a great eye for just detailed questions, follow-ups, get to the bottom line, and has been really helpful, great note taker, really good at documenting as well. And then Dusty McCracken is our final member. He's also a planning commission member. He's in retail management, project planning, good attention to legal details. He's brought up several questions already that we wanted to investigate. And he also has a passion for community service. So it's a great team, and I'm really pleased to be a part of it. In our meetings, we set out pretty quickly to develop some objectives. And the first one obviously came from you folks, the fiscal responsibility. We want to take the business recommendations that develop the best financial situation for the town and its residents. Secondarily, resident responsibility. We wanted to get input from the people that live here and the people that visit here, and really see how they want to use the pier, what they want to see on the pier. We also decided on a phased approach. We figured we couldn't do everything at once, and we wanted to concentrate primarily on the major buildings, B, C, and D in the schematics you'll see. There's 2 other smaller spaces. There's some kiosks, and of course, there's also other considerations like smoking, pets, admissions, and all that. And we're going to deal with that in later phases. We also wanted to take a business responsibility. The town was developing the RFPs even before we started, and had an April 8th deadline. We said, well, we definitely want to honor the businesses that met that timing. We wanted to work with those first submissions. And then timeliness. We definitely wanted to take these recommendations or take all these inputs and make our recommendations to allow time for negotiation before pier completion, to keep costs down for the businesses coming in, because they're all going to have things they need to change and purpose build, complete the buildings. And we also want the pier to be ready for visitors as soon as possible. So our timeline, we were chosen by town council February 22nd, and we had our first meeting on March 4th. We were advised to tour the pier under construction. We did that on the 11th. And by the 21st, we had our first meeting after electing our officers. So that was really the beginning when we started, set our own agenda and started to work at that point. One of the first things we requested was a peer email so that we could get input that way. We started to work on a survey. You'll see that coming up. Again, the RFP was already well underway and the responses were due. So we didn't have input there, but we wanted to observe those submissions as closely as possible. They came in April 8th. We only got 10, which was, we had hoped to see more, but I mean, that's what we got in that time frame. And several of those were kiosks. So we didn't have a ton to choose from, but again, we wanted to honor the businesses that did submit on time. We had also been advised to go visit the Charleston area piers, Folly Beach and Mount Pleasant. We did that on the 14th, got a wealth of information. John Hyatt was instrumental in setting that up and taking all the inputs that we got from them. We're still referring to all that information and doing some other follow-ups. We got the RFP responses on April 18th and immediately started to discuss those things in our committee meetings. The survey was conducted between the 18th and 24th, and we got a ton of input. I think you're going to find that interesting, informative, hopefully encouraging. Tabitha's going to go through the details there. May 2nd, we had our first committee executive session, and we reviewed the proposals in detail, realized some data gaps, some incomplete info in the presentation or the proposal responses. And we did some follow-up. We worked with Bill and he said, go directly to those businesses. We did through email, phone call, and even some visits to a couple of the businesses to gather additional information. And we did a second executive session on the 16th to develop our strategy. And that leads us right here to the 25th, presenting the first recommendations to town council. So I'm going to invite Tabitha to come up and go through the survey details. There you go. Thank you.
Good job.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. All right. So this survey, which is really important to all of us because we really wanted to know what the residents wanted, surrounding communities, residents, all of them. What do you guys want? Thank you, Sherry, for your peer, because it is your peer. So that's where the survey came in. And I will just say that Robert Blomquist let us know that the peer survey brought in the most responses than any other survey that's been put on the town to his knowledge. So I thought that was pretty cool. The survey goal was to identify the desired features of the pier, business types and admission fees, and admission fee thoughts. Peer survey was open for 7 days, and that was April 18th through the 24th. The survey was announced on the town's website news section of the town's Facebook page and the town's Facebook page. There were 898 responses that were completed on the survey, which I thought was pretty awesome. There were 366 residents and 532 non-residents. What you're going to see there is 77 were moved from resident to non-residents. And that basically means that their street address did not align with the town of Surfside Beach proper. And so they were moved to non-residents. So, and then another note for that would be none of the analysis that you're about to see was done until the residency was established from those 77. So in the next four slides, we will review the results from the public in 4 categories: features that they want on the pier, businesses, the business types that they want on the pier, admission, charge or not charge, that's the big question. And then finally, the open feedback section. So we'll begin with that. So the feature questions, the question was select 3 features of the new pier that are important to you. And you can pick, they picked up to 3. So some picked 1, some picked 2, some picked 3. So that's why you're going to see a little bit of difference in the totals as we follow through the slides. So the top 3 were multiple dining and food options, number 1, family-friendly atmosphere, live music and events. And then of course, 4 and 5, very worth the mention, something unique and different than other peers, and then fishing focused. But the top 3 represented 60% of the overall feature question. Okay, the next is the business type question. So select the 3 businesses that would interest you the most while enjoying the pier. So those top 3 include a restaurant, ice cream or frozen treats shop, bar and grill. But to note, you have number 4, coffee, tea, breakfast options, and bait and tackle store. So you can see a complete difference of the percentages and how that's done. So 57% were the top 3 for that piece. And this is the question that everybody wants to know. Should we charge or should we not? So a couple things I'm going to note on here. You'll see in the pie chart the total graph there. And then you will see that the pie chart matches what's below, which is the below questions. And sorry, guys. And then you'll look at, what the residents versus the non-residents speak to in charging admission on the pier. Clearly, overall speaking, no one really wants to charge admission for the pier, whether you're a resident or non-resident, and that's clearly in the numbers that you guys see. There was a slight variance in the resident versus non-resident on when we should charge, if we should charge. So just looking at the 2 red circles on the graphs, you'll see that the difference is in the residents, they should only be an admission charge for those who do not pay for town property taxes. But again, if you look at the difference in the graph, it's clearly stated that no one wants us to charge for admission to this pier. So we found that very interesting. All right, and then we will move over to the open feedback questions. So 726 individual responses, and this is open feedback means, do you have any feedback or ideas? So we allow people to go in and give us their ideas and type in a box and literally just tell us what they're thinking. So Alex did a word search that allowed us to find like the top words that were being used in the actual feedback questions. So as you can see here, we put it together where family was the #1 word search that people were looking for, parking, and then of course friendly, restaurants, and then from there it goes bar, fishing. So you can see that of all 726 responses, the greatest were those top 4 or 5 there. And if you guys have any questions on that, just let me know. But the committee went through all of the wording, and we really went through and did all the word searching and so forth for you. But we'll be happy to give you every single one of those responses, 726, if you guys would like them. But if that's it, I'm going to turn it over to Alex, who's going to walk you through how we thought about the phased approach in the next section. Thanks, Alex.
Good evening, everyone. So I remember in our first meeting, we asked the mayor what was the scope of the peer committee. And to paraphrase, it was anything to do with the pier, which is an awful lot, for better or for worse. And as we started working through our meetings, a lot of different topics started to materialize as evidenced by the various bullets on the screen. And there kind of is a natural order of how things started getting bucketed together. And for explanation purposes, we broke it down into 3 phases. Phase 1, which could be considered kind of the high priority from a timing perspective and a dollar and cent perspective, had to do with the retail selections. Retail selections are defined as interior or for lease deck space at the end of the pier. So around the phase 1 items were the survey that was talked about just a moment ago by Tabitha. We had an appraisal done. Thanks, Bill. Collected the RFP responses, thinking through different types of businesses that should be on the pier or could be on the pier, the financial impacts of leasing or the town managing any of those individual businesses, the total economic value that they add to the pier, the asset value that they're bringing to the table, how it looked, the aesthetics, and ultimately bringing us here to we're starting to make some recommendations for the businesses themselves, as well as some negotiation suggestions. The second phase, I would say, are a little bit smaller in scope to the retail selections, but it's broken down into 2 categories. One is the kiosks. So if you're familiar with the Garden City Pier, they've got hair braiding, and there's also the water ice. So things along those lines. We've got quite a few RFP responses around kiosks. What do they look like? Where are they arranged? How big are they? Are they annual renewable leases? What's the financial impact of the pier and the draw from those? The other things are the build outs. So some things that we learned when we went down to Charleston for those 2 bullets there, shower towers and changing rooms, which might represent an incremental initial cost. But the way it was explained to us down in the Charleston area was those 2 items there relieve a lot of congestion up in the normal bathrooms. They also relieve a lot of cleaning. So people constantly removing sand out from the pier, the stairs, the ramp, the elevators, clogged sink drains. You actually, in the long term, might actually save money by having some type of arrangement where you have a few extra shower towers under the pier with changing rooms, just for the benefit of those who are actually on the pier. Part and parcel to that are pavers and some other aesthetics underneath the pier. In bold is the pier power needs. It was loud and clear to us in many different settings in our investigations of other piers and just what business needs are, is that as power goes out to the end of the pier, we want to have a band there. If there's going to be some type of business on the end, individual kiosks, take whatever power we think we have and double or triple it. So we're working through that. John's done a good deal of work there. Bike racks, LED boards, advertising. This is an opportunity in select spaces along the pier to drive some incremental revenue. Dusty's been doing a good amount of work on that. Family plaques, if you think of the Marsh Walk, you go every couple of feet, there's a nice little plaque. Could be a way for someone to put their own personalized stamp on the pier and at the same time help fund some of these incremental items that I'm shouting out. And the Historical Society of Surfside Beach also had some ideas around, the multiple iterations of the pier through storms, how to highlight that, and people can have the opportunity to read about the pier, appreciate the concrete structure they're standing on versus the wooden one that they previously had, and why the change and the different iterations and ownership of the pier. Phase 3 is operating considerations. So these are all of the, what time do the gates open? Is there not admission, fishing charge, rod rental, parking, pet security, fish cleaning stations? Do we have the rings to help bring a fish up? Just trying to look at other piers. I mentioned insurance is mentioned there, which is something that we'd like to help think through. So I'll stop there. That's the 3 main buckets of work. If I take those 3 buckets of work and move them to the left side of the screen, you'll see phase 1, 2, and 3 working from the top to the bottom. Each of those phases have got different parts of a sequencing of workflow. The first thing we did was like a data collection. This is our discovery efforts. And once we received enough data to start thinking through what that data meant, moved into our analysis section and ultimately to our recommendations. So if you follow each arrow to the right, you'll see that today we're here with recommendations on the retail selections. We're expecting over the next month or 2 for the kiosks and the build out to be able to present recommendations on those items, and shortly thereafter, some of the operating considerations. Again, they kind of sequence the need in time and lead time around leasing out the spaces. Just to get everybody centered on what the pier looks like, a close to scale model is on the screen. So this is a bird's eye view of the pier. E to the right is out over the water. A and B are right on Ocean Boulevard. A in the diagonal shaded font or fill, that's the existing Atlantic Restaurant Group lease. What was sent out for RFP requests were B, C, D, and E. E was defined in the RFP as anything out on the pier, which could be kiosk, it could be the pier end. What was not sent out for RFP responses were the smaller spaces of F and G. That's right on the corner So it presents an opportunity nonetheless. Worth noting is that the diagonal shaded box represents more than half of the entirety of all spaces available. So when you think of what can we do with the pier, more than half of it's already done, represented on the top row. The matrix at the bottom is it's leased, that's already locked down. So it's up to us and the pier committee to work through the rest of the remaining spaces, to think through financial viability and the like, and make recommendations to the council. Also in there, in your package, are the interior, exterior retail space and storage for each of those units. So for any of these businesses, as we started thinking through, what got 10 responses for each of those, the town could potentially run a similar business or something completely different. How should we approach our thought process around the town running a business? We did learn a lot from Folly Beach and Mount Pleasant piers, and that's represented in, so apologies, as I look at it, it's a pretty busy slide, but I'll try to hit the highlights. So the numbers you're looking at the center of the screen are the previous 6 years from fiscal year 16-17 to fiscal year 2021, the financial results of both Mount Pleasant and Folly Beach. Mount Pleasant over the previous 6 years accumulated a net negative return of about $900,000. Never had a positive year. Folly Beach, a little bit mixed. You could say they were significantly negative the former previous 2 years, largely due to the fishing pier itself being closed. The stores were still open. There was a restaurant there that in and around COVID had closed, but also generated a lease. But on the whole, over 6 years, they were $400,000 in the red. Bear in mind that those two entities are part of the Charleston County Parks and Recreation System. It's a $32 million organization. So call it 3 times the size of our town. So there's this one organization that's in charge of parks. That's 3 times the size revenue than Surfside Beach. They benefit from a separate ad valorem tax in Charleston County, which is over half of their income. They've got layers of leadership management expertise in retail, hiring, firing. At peak, they've got 1,200 staff. So it's a big entity with experience running these types of organizations. And, they do a lot of great work. We were very impressed down there, but from a dollars and cents standpoint, at the end of the day, maybe it makes more sense to lean away largely from the town trying to be in a capitalist market. There's very few examples in the world of governments running a successful business. No. Not saying it can't happen, but in our recommendations, there is a component of this where we think there's an opportunity for the town to capitalize. Charleston County Parks and Recs were very generous with information, and we were able to see where sales were drawn from, their highest sales at each site based upon packaged goods versus merchandise, et cetera. Maybe there's a chance in there where we could thread a needle, have a town presence on the pier, and actually drive some revenue. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But on the whole, it didn't seem like a great glaring neon sign saying Surfside Beach, open up your own businesses, in our estimation. Okay, a little bit more at a 50,000 foot elevation on economics. We're operating with some limited data to put together any semblance of a proper P&L on the pier, whether it be by municipal accounting standards or cash flow basis. I know, Bill, you're working on getting some individual department estimates, but as we've cobbled together what we could based upon some recent budget meetings that were public, looking back at the 2016 budget when the pier was here, trying to prorate some of those numbers, make some estimates around H-tax and the like. If I factor in our debt service, which is 330 and change per year, it gets really hard isolated for the pier to be a profitable standalone business. But all is not lost. And if you look to the right, the bullseye there, the pier in the red, right? It's red on purpose, right? In isolation, while we have debt, it gets really hard no matter which business we choose. And even being a little optimistic with some sales results and some taxes associated with it, it's real hard to become like a super profitable item, which is fine. That's not the entire purpose of the pier. But as we look a little bit more broadly, across how it could impact parking outside of the pier parking. If it attracts in a few more visitors to some of the other adjacent restaurants, and then there's taxes associated with that the town benefits from. If our seasonality gets a little smoother, because fishermen generally, there are some benefits to fishing off season, which we would define as like a kind of off-season beach. And local rents might go up a little bit. Like if there is like a substantial, like the centerpiece of the town is actually not busted timber, maybe some of the local rents go up a little bit. We benefit from that. Maybe some businesses on 17 that are vacant now. There's a little more traffic here and it becomes viable to an entrepreneur. But just some examples of that are for A and H tax, which represents about $2.3 million. We see a 10% lift in that. That's $230,000. That's 3/4 of our loan on the pier. If our parking, we get a 25% lift of that net of the linear charges. That's about 55 grand. And if our property taxes, driven by some increases in property values and a little bit of turnover, go up 2%, that's another 70,000 net to the town. So in short order, looking at that, opening aperture, suddenly the pier itself starts to become a financial benefit for the town on a large scale. All right, moving on. So all that, those bullets kind of coalesce around just two lenses that we looked at this. The yellow being, what do folks that would potentially visit here or live here want out of the town? 90% want a restaurant, ice cream, bar and grill, coffee and breakfast, bait and tackle. And then we gathered enough information to make some educated decisions around business potential, what it will do for the town, increased asset value, which businesses are kicking in to improve the value of the pier. A little bit subjective, but put our heads together with all our experience to talk about business experience in the RFP proposals and different attachment revenue, as I previously mentioned. As the intersection of those two different lenses came into play, we had the small triangle in the middle of our initial committee recommendations, which we'll look to get into. So I know that the next section on the agenda is public comments, but I think it's important to announce publicly why an executive session. We did converse, had correspondence with our new Jenny, the new town attorney, about this. And she concurred that at this point in negotiations, there's actually substantial risk to the town to make this information public. Some of those reasons are there's proprietary business models that were shared with us on the committee and you and council. If you think about it from a lease perspective, if we select someone who has the highest offered lease rate and we start to enter negotiations and that business knows that the next one down is $10 less per square foot, that puts the town at a disadvantage if they, in negotiation, drop their non-binding proposal to us. Also, if all lease prices were out in the open, if there was a enterprising individual who wanted to come in and put a late proposal in, that they have all the benefit of knowing what everybody else proposed, and they didn't follow the rules, so to speak. So there's a level of ethics and integrity in there too. I will conclude by saying I think it makes a lot of sense at the nearest point possible to share details with the public. That can be done prior to the town signing anything, and it usually looks like it's when the lease is signed by the business owner prior to the town sign. That is when it can become public information where the public can digest it, comment on it, make appeals one way or the other to council, and it doesn't become something that's completely done under the cover of darkness, so to speak. So that's it for this session. I think there's public comments, and if you're so inclined to start getting into some brass tacks around the details of the recommendations, we ask that you vote for executive session.
Mayor, I got some questions.
Hold on, go ahead.
Oh, I just, after seeing the survey results, a lot of things came on my mind, and like, it's easy to say you want it free. It's easy for all of us to say that. But I look at the model that we have, the next pier up, and they make almost 200,000 a year off of people paying to enter it. And you got to consider that.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for the point in the question. We haven't gotten to the actual recommendation on that. That
No.
would be phase 3.
Okay, but
And we're gonna at some, in the next few months, present an opinion on the matter. We're reporting out what folks put in the survey, which there was a strong lean towards no fee, which is understandable. Not a lot of people raise their hand and say, yeah, charge me. But yeah, without a doubt, some of the gaps that in our cocktail napkin math can surely be sealed up in year with an admission fee, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So that's a great financial decision for you guys.
Yeah, okay. I'll ask the rest later then.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to open it now to public comments. So if anybody has any public comments about this, and now's the time to step up. Well, that was short.
He did, you did.
Yeah, that was very good. Very, very good. Well, with that, basically what I need is a recommendation or a motion to go into executive session to discuss this further.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose we go into executive session to, for the Freedom of Information Act for 30-4-70 A and 2, discussion of negotiations.
Second.
Okay, any discussion before we vote on it? I will say that I had some comments on it before that, with our attorney that we did, but, the attorney is basically, I guess, satisfied with the ability to go into executive session. So with that, Mr. Stamey?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Holder?
Yes.
Preclaw?
Yes.
Kinkin?
Yes.
Drake?
Yes.
And I'm yes also. So with that, we will be going into executive session. Everybody is free to hang out, and when we get done, we'll invite everybody back in and let you know what the result is.